Welcome to Rubber Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show Adam Shardiff, who is the host of Film Wax Radio. It's a wonderful podcast. Adam, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again.
Thank you, Robert. It's great to be back. How many does this make?
This
I don't know.
is, I think this is the fourth.
Third? The fourth time.
Yeah, fourth. It's been a little while. But we're diving into Italian cinema today, so we're doing La Cliché. I'll just read a short synopsis. A young woman meets a vital young man, but their love affair is doomed because of the man's materialistic nature. In a way, this film is hard to kind of summarize because the one on Letterboxd was very, very different than the one on IMDb. The director is Michelangelo Antonioni, and he wrote the screenplay with Tonino Gura. I hope I have that right. It starred Monica Vitti and
Well, you're the
Alain.
Italian one in the family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do my best. And of course, it starred Monica Vitti and Alain Delon. All right. So, do
Alain
you
Delon.
do you
Um,
remember when you first
and
saw
we
this,
should
Adam?
also we should also I don't know, years ago, but I really got into him man, like probably 10 years ago. I don't really remember. I've only seen it once before though. And I just remember at the time so grateful to
Yeah.
be find Antonioni. Like I'd seen Blow Up rather, Blow Up
Right.
years before. That was my introduction. But and then I kind of did a deeper dive into Antonioni, and I just realized, oh my gosh, this trilogy is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I know when we were discussing what to talk about today, that this was a suggestion of yours. So what was it
Oh, it
about this
was.
film that? Yeah, yeah, we talked a couple of months ago to
I
nail
know that.
something down. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
what,
that.
what? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I've reviewed it before, but I reviewed it back when my
Oh,
first show first started. So at the time, my episodes were very short as I was still finding a voice. So yeah,
right. That's
I'm
smart though.
redoing. Yeah, I'm redoing films that were short reviews when I started. So this is a perfect one. But what is it that you like about the film? I'm curious your feelings about it.
Monica Vitti, it's her face. I
That'll do
I
it.
don't know. I've always had I don't know, these stories that or films rather, that where the narrative is almost beside the point. It's all about it, like kind of emotional performance. I've always liked that, and I like these very slow films that where really like camera just really stays on the faces of people, and there's a lot of silence and long takes. I don't know. I and films about psychological films about alienation. It's this period of time, that I really just enjoy seeing film. And the other thing is I also like seeing the backdrops, the cities where these are shot, and there's such an attention to that in these films by not only Antonioni but by his contemporaries in France and other countries as well. That were seen to be going on at the time, but there was a real focus on in the internal psychology that had not been much of a focus, prior to this period of time, which was kind of which a lot of people have no tolerance for, but I enjoy
Right.
it.
I do too. Yeah, because I first saw it about 11 years ago, and I had a hard time with him initially because I mean, there's his films are in a good way really hard to watch. I mean, they're challenging movies, and they're so they're like walking around an art gallery, and he
Oh,
was a painter, as I'm sure, and it's very stylized, and you really have to sort of he's not feeding you any answers. I mean, you have to really interpret these things and think them through in these sort of stylized images. I mean, every shot can be a painting almost. It's quite extraordinary. But I think once you kind of got a handle on it, you can enjoy it a lot more. Because I remember my first viewing being really tough, but then the more you think about it, you're like, okay, well, he's talking about alienation. He's talking about the world changing in this post Italian economic boom, and it's almost hard to believe that he's not criticizing because as he said. He's like, well, he said he wasn't necessarily criticizing the world, the way the world's changing. He was just afraid that humans wouldn't be able to
Adapt.
adjust to it. Which it's almost hard to believe because it feels like it feels pretty like critical. You look at those bank scenes, those stock market scenes, and he really hangs on them for quite a while and just showing these guys money obsessed and shouting, and it's the liveliest scenes. And of course, anything that's lively has to do with money. You see what happens to like Vittoria's mother, and she sort of can't believe what's happening to her. She's becoming so money obsessed, and I even love those moments. There's like a moment of silence for someone who died, and it's you just feel that they're all just waiting to jump right back in there and shout as soon as it's over. They're back in there shouting and shouting. And there's a similar moment later when that guy who stole Alain Delon's car, and then he winds up, getting into an accident, and they fish the car out, and you see that he's only concerned with the car. He doesn't even mention that this guy died. And you see that Vittoria is sort of, baffled by, she's sort of really disillusioned by everything. I mean,
Right.
was that your impression of those?
Yeah, for sure. It definitely was grappling with modernity versus, um, old fashioned. And I mean, you're talking about a country where it's that's so old, and where they're still living among relics. So there's
Yeah,
that tension. There's that tension, and of course, just simpler living versus the new economy, as you mentioned, and more materialistic, and wave of that people were experiencing. And it was very attractive to them. So yeah, I'm sure Antonioni saw the danger in it, perhaps, or at least the struggle that would, sort of be part of that. I don't know. And so yeah, these people around her are sort of grabbing hold of this new more materialistic way of life. But you can see the tension between the old and the new there throughout the film, and with the people living in kind of modern buildings, but in the background there was always these interesting architectures and everything else. I like even the stock exchange, as you mentioned, was in this ancient relic of a building, really, and I think it was like however many hundreds of years ago, that pope that was there at the time decided that they wanted to use this building as like to bring it up to date so people could use it again. And I guess it had been sitting idle, as relics mostly do. But they refurnished it and made it, and it was like the center for taxation in Rome, and then it evolved eventually into where their stock market was.
right.
So it's interesting to have seen that, but you do have to kind of watch it, and to get to your point, you have to watch the film. It requires of you to sit with it, kind of think about it,
Yeah,
and come up with your own ideas of like what he's getting at. And a lot of films that we watch, do that as much, whereas he really was requiring that of his viewers, and especially for people like yourself, myself, where we watch more films than probably the average person, doesn't really give us the time, to really think about what he's getting at in those films. And it's refreshing to have to be forced to do that, since we're talking about the film, to kind of think
yeah,
more about it.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. You certainly can't just watch it once. I mean, I was fortunate that I mean, I've seen it at least, 4 times. So, but
Oh,
I think if I was only seeing it once and then talking about it today, I would say, hang on, we're gonna have to do this another time because it certainly requires a great deal of thought. And the interesting thing about every scene, I mean, obviously we're not going to do this, but you can talk about, like I said, every single shot because nothing is accidental. I mean, everything is absolutely intentional down to every prop, every shot, everything in the street.
oh yeah. Or in the
Everything
apartments,
is
the way he, every angle, and what objects are in the frame
yeah,
or in, behind the actors, is all, as you say, very intentional. There's nothing accidental happening in this Antonioni film. He really was exploring so much, and so he had to work very closely with Gianni, his cinematographer, who ended
yeah.
up doing. I think I wrote down he did La Notte as
Yeah,
well, the
he
same
did La
cinematographer,
Notte. He also did eight
and
and a
then
half.
right, and
Um,
Juliet of the Spirits
yes,
for
he's an
Fellini.
incredible DOP.
What's your feeling? If I can turn the tables for a second, like what are your feelings? I think is the two major Italian filmmakers, of the post-war period. Fellini and Antonioni, and I wonder where you fall in terms of the competition. There's no competition there. They're doing very different things, but
Yeah.
do you have a preference of one over the other?
I would say I probably prefer Fellini. Um, it's hard to articulate why necessarily. There's something just. I mean, his films are equally as challenging, but his films also have a great deal of sort of warmth and a sense of
Humor,
humor.
right?
And just they're extremely lively, whereas I
Right.
love Antonioni, but he's much colder.
That's very true. Good observation. It's funny because I'm not, I don't consider myself a colder person, but for some reason I just like what he was, Antonioni, like he just seemed, there's something more ambitious with him.
Oh
I had the
yeah,
same
yeah.
kind of feeling about um Eric Romer, let's say,
Ah, yeah.
where, like, he was also exploring the psychological and the alienations and the inner exploration of people, as opposed to other filmmakers. I won't even say, because but his contemporaries, like, so I don't know, there's something about it. There are definitely moments in many Fellini movies that are among my favorites in all of cinema, but I feel like, I don't know, I was always more into Antonioni. Interestingly,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I've seen all of just about every Fellini movie, but and there's some that are just so fantastic,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, and he had probably a greater output than Antonioni,
Well,
but
it's actually I didn't think of Romer as a comparison, which I think is true, and it's interesting because Romer is very different in the sense that his films are very dialogue heavy, whereas Antonioni is it's all
it's
about the
spare.
images. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But they're
Yeah.
both exploring similar ideas, I think.
Similar
I don't know,
ideas.
like
Yeah.
trying to get at things, And there is dialogue. I mean, I think there's probably more dialogue, I'm guessing, in La Notte,
Yeah.
and in
L'Avventura.
La
Yeah.
Ventura, which may comprise a loose sort of trilogy,
Yeah.
that explore similar themes. But this is the least. I mean, when we're talking like Cleese, is the least of the, like, plot driven of the three, like,
Yeah.
for certain.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's bolder because a lot of things are
Yeah,
sort of intentionally vague, and so like again, it makes it harder for the audience. I mean, I probably prefer the other two just because they have the dynamics between the characters to me are more interesting or more, that it's more layered. Whereas as this sort of, and obviously it's intentional that
right.
there's nothing between these people, and even with Piero and Vittoria, she thinks that she's falling in love with him, but really it to me anyways was just this strong physical attraction. I mean, you see when they eventually kiss, it's very passionate, and it's clearly this wasn't going to work because he's this money obsessed guy, and he even says to her, "I don't understand you," and things like that. And he's also quite ruthless. I mean, you see when everyone starts losing their money, when those stocks start to crash, and I mean, he's horrible to some of those people who, he says to that one guy, he's like, cough it up. He's like, what did you do with all your money? What did you do with all this money you won over the years? And slams the door on his face. And I'm just like, the only
Where's
thing
the
she could see
compassion?
in him, yeah, the only thing she could see in him is his looks, and obviously those great images
Well,
kissing through they kiss through the
the
windows. I mean, that
glass, the
says it all. The
glass,
glass,
very
sorry.
sexy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, right. It
But
does also right. It's also says a lot about them as a couple.
yeah,
But I kind of I don't know. I like his character. You know,
Piero.
Piero. Thank you. He I kind of like him. I mean, because he's kind of very practical. It's like anybody who's a professional gambler. If you're looking to, first of all, you don't become a gambler to you have to you realize you're going to lose money,
Right, right,
and
yeah.
and you have to look at it as just like any other kind of commodity or whatever. I mean, it's just like so I don't know, like yeah, he was in it. I don't know. I had some respect for him as well. Like I didn't look at him as being a shallow person. I just didn't. I didn't
Yeah,
or
well, yeah, you're right. I
character.
mean, he is more like when all those stocks crash, he's like one of the calmest people. He's like, oh, that's the way it goes.
That's the way the cookie crumbles, so to speak. Yeah, and it'll come back again. You just have to you have to if you're going to play the game, you have to be able to stick with the tough
Yeah,
times as well as the great times.
yeah, he he
But
he seems to
but
understand
it's
that.
yeah. So he's going to survive, right? He'll survive into the modern era that Italy's going through. We know that much. Is
Oh,
she?
for
Will
sure.
she? Is the question because she is sort of on unsure footing. She doesn't really doesn't be able to connect that well. What? Okay, here's a question for you. There's a scene relatively early in where her friend and her go to their neighbors who's
Oh,
a
yes.
it's a
Yeah.
kind of a strange scene, or the most experimental in some ways, because this friend of hers is one of these sort of proto, I don't know, imperialist types, who go to Africa, who shoot photography, but also kind of bring back all these, what would you call them, finding, I don't know, what would you call this
Artifacts
stuff?
and
Artifacts.
yeah, the
Yeah,
swords
artifacts, and
and yeah.
you know, and I'm just was trying to figure out how that fit into the film, and then Vittoria, Monica Vitti's character, she at one point in the most kind of like comical but also bizarre, she has painted herself a black,
Oh
African
God, yeah.
person, and then comes out and does this dance and African type of dance with a spear and everything. It's very racist.
It is,
Uh,
yeah.
it's extremely racist, but it's almost mocking the other character, and maybe Antonioni was actually doing it intentionally. But it's a very like kind of if that's the case, it's a very brave move because I mean, how are people supposed to interpret
Yeah.
what she's doing other than mocking African people?
Yeah, well, I never quite understood that scene, and but then when I saw it the other night again, because objects are such a big part of this film, like
Right.
what kind of objects people surround themselves with
Yeah.
sort of say a lot about them. And I think the fact that she goes to this person's place and she has these pictures from Kenya and all these different artifacts, and I think that because she's Vittoria is looking for some kind of life that is not just the materialism and people turning into zombies and obsessed with money and stuff like that. She sees something in those images that are different, and I think she's sort of trying to mimic it, and it kind of gives her this like lease on life, almost like primitive quality of her just being sort of very, um, you know, alive in a sense. I
Mhm.
mean, it's unfortunate that they chose to do blackface. I don't think he was trying to say that this character is racist. I think
No, I
yeah,
agree.
yeah,
It's interesting. I started to listen. I was watching this again last night, just to be so it was fresh, and then I was going to restart it with the audio commentary because I was kind of curious to know
yeah,
what Richard Pena, who is a film historian and ran the New York Film Festival, or really Lincoln Center Film Department for quite a while. And he's a professor at Columbia, and he's like very knowledgeable. But I got through about a half hour of him talking. I was like, okay, enough is going to. But um, anyway, but I was kind of curious to hear what he had to say about that scene. I don't think I made it quite to that scene though. But
yeah. Well, I mean, I think I think if it were today, I think you could have done the same thing without the blackface. I mean, you would have known that she was trying to mimic what she sees,
yeah, but
and
it's a good point. You're right. There is like this primitive
yeah,
freedom almost like that. I could see like the very buttoned up conservative upbringing, that might be very attractive and appealing, and
yeah,
scary.
yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, if anything, the he makes the other person who had lived in Kenya, the woman in there, blatantly racist because she starts calling them, oh, they're a bunch of monkeys and all this stuff. And you see how Victoria's all
Yeah.
she's almost like she's appalled by that. Also because I think she thinks that these people know something that we don't know.
Right.
She's
Yeah. Yeah.
just by those
So there's a
images, like it's
respect kind of.
yeah, it's very, if anything, she thinks, they're more intelligent or they understand life. But it later the scene where they go flying in the plane and then they land, it's interesting because he has Vittoria going into this looks like a cafe, and there's these two black men outside, and they're also just sitting very much like her boyfriend in the first scene, zombie like, and
Hmm.
again, it's like, why did he put these two men there? And I really can't take credit for this interpretation, but it's just over things I read. I mean, some people thought that she maybe was thinking, oh, well, maybe there are other people who have a lease on life that I need to find. But then when from those images from Kenya, but then now it's almost like she's skeptical again by seeing two black men who may be from Kenya sitting there zombie like,
Hmm.
very much like her boyfriend in the first scene who she's leaving. And
Ricardo.
yeah,
Mm.
Ricardo. And it's interesting because even when they go up in the plane, like it's one of the few times you really see her alive. It's like, yeah, because she's like leaving the earth.
Yeah.
There's a sort of life, there's a freedom. Um, that's
It's a
very make
small, yeah, it's a small, like four
yeah.
seater or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, he does a similar thing in
Sure.
Zabriskie Point. Yeah, the character just takes off in a plane.
Oh,
He
I don't
does.
remember that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
he does. Because he's everything in America is to him is insane, and so he flies away. And there's a similar scene. There's that with I really enjoyed that with the plane there, and I mean, she's again, it's all these things are intentionally vague because you're like, well, what does she want? What is she looking
Right.
for? And clearly it's just something, some kind of life. He's got that fan on in the first scene, blowing in her hair. It's an obvious sort of metaphor for freedom and, and
Hmm.
looking for something. I mean, I really do like that first scene. I mean, again, just this connection with objects because he starts with that shot of the books and you just see an elbow in a white shirt, and then it pans across and then you see Ricardo. And so in that first scene, he's mostly static, surrounded by his the things he's consumed. And you look at the way she plays with her objects, like she puts her hands through frames and she's always trying to like control the objects, and she's restless and she's moving around. You could even say that about the glass, kissing through the glass. I mean, everything she's trying to sort of control and not let sort of consume her or control her, whereas everybody else is very much controlled by their objects, their money. I thought that was very interesting, and
Yeah.
just those images. I mean, I'm very intrigued by that first scene because at one point she's there's a reflection of her in the mirror, and then he's completely on the other side. It almost looks like two different shots.
Hmm.
I mean, the disc you could that just speaks volumes. You see her in the door frame, or they're separated by a wall. I mean, one of the classic examples in the stock exchange is that massive pillar that separates her and Delon. It's all these things are they speak volumes. I mean, obviously, some of the images are obvious about what he's going for, and then some
Well,
of
I
them
don't think he
aren't.
cares about being obvious or not, right?
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, I
not at
think
all.
the great thing about Antonioni, especially in this trilogy, it just seems like he's interested in certain themes, but I don't know that he's got them all figured out. Maybe
Right.
he's just using the filmmaking to explore them, and then it's like, well, you can take what from it what you will as
Yeah.
somebody who's consuming the films, um, that's what I kind of really appreciate about him. He's definitely an experimental filmmaker, and Zabriskie Point, which you brought up, is another example of that. Even though it's in a different period in his
Yeah.
oeuvre, in his filmmaking, and then um, he did The Passenger in America as well. I wasn't sure which one you were asking about, but
Yeah.
interesting. He just became a star. Like there's this period where all these actors like Jack Nicholson of the day, very big, powerful movie stars here, wanted to work with
Yeah.
they wanted to work with these filmmakers like Antonioni and Truffaut, and because they really appreciated what that kind of theme oriented and the exploration of the inner self and all that, these themes that all of a sudden became very attractive for a very short period of time.
Yeah.
Here in the States, I mean, a few years later it would all be over, but
Yeah.
that's why I did appreciate Antonioni as a real true artist.
Oh yeah, certainly. And I read that apparently, because the last 7 minutes are just, those
Yeah,
various shots
yeah.
of like the empty streets. I mean, some of them are exactly where they were, Delon and Vitti, and now they're just
7 minutes
empty.
of just of
7 minutes.
exterior shots
Yeah,
of
and apparently
and
some distributors or
yeah,
theater owners just cut it, because they were like, "What is
where
this?"
they can you imagine that? Yeah, no, it's like well, you're worried about word getting out, maybe people aren't going to come see it, they but yeah, man, that guy was a brave filmmaker.
Oh, for sure. And I in a way, I was watching the on the Criterion channel.
Hmm.
There was a great interview with a film scholar, and he was saying like in a way it almost looks like science fiction. I mean that big like mushroom building when she opens the
Yeah,
curtains,
which
and it almost looks like the end of the world. The streets are so empty. It's hard to believe
right.
it's Rome.
Yeah,
I
I
mean
know.
I know there
Well,
are obviously
right,
parts
it's
of
on the
Rome that
outskirts
are the
probably, but
outskirts. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and there's contrast. It just shows a lot of contrast. But yeah, but that building, I think, was part of a planned World's Fair. Mussolini was going to have Rome host the World's Fair, apparently,
Mm.
and in a celebration of fascism.
Oh
I think
God.
that, yeah, didn't happen. I don't think, but I think that building was constructed. For the World's Fair, unless I'm mistaken. I think I remember that. I was just doing a little looking into that when we started, just to see what more I could find out about it.
Yeah, I
But
didn't know that, but I thought it was,
mhm.
because it's such a weird image, and I think it's true, especially all the street lights, particularly at the end where it looks like it's going to, again, the eclipse, it looks like it's just going to explode and blow up the world or something, but it's very eerie, it's
Mhm.
very
Yeah,
moody, and I mean it's just the images are just so powerful that one of them is just like just all this like junk, just on this street that they pass by. It's just amazing to me because it's so minimal, but yet I think it does have a very sci-fi feel. I don't know if
vibe
that was
to
your
it.
impression.
Yeah, there's a little. I would say it was kind of in this dystopia types of
Yeah. Yeah,
put the post-apocalyptic kind of almost vibe to it at times, in those those very wide shots with that are like empty. There's very few people in any of those shots, and um, yeah, I think that's valid.
for sure, for sure. Like I said, we could talk about so many images here. I mean, bars over the
Right.
faces. That's like almost something like out of film noir. You see
Yeah.
Ricardo at one point, her boyfriend is trying to get her attention and she's hiding in her apartment. And then you see as she looks out, it's the bars from her window completely over his face, and like obviously that feeling of being trapped and claustrophobic and stuck and this sort of film. I mean, he was no stranger to film to noir himself. Antonioni. Is there a? I know we've talked a lot about the various images, but is there a favorite of yours that really pops in this that maybe you'd want to frame or you know?
Oh, I love. I guess we already talked about it, but I do love that first time that they kiss through the glass.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's like the real.
I also love the. There's I also loved her just lingering over there. I think you alluded to this guy, one of the guys that lost his fortune
Yeah.
in the stock market crash. And so very, kind of that sort of heavy guy that was,
Yes.
he's lost like 50 million lira or something like that. And he's, walks over to a nearby cafe. She's intrigued by him, how he's handling, because
Yes.
everybody else is screaming and raging, and he's so quiet, and he just walks down the street to a cafe to sit
Yeah.
down and have some mineral water and and do
Yeah.
something on a piece of paper, right? So, and she's kind of intrigued by this guy, and like there's that shot where she's sort of standing over him, and he barely notices her. Well, I thought that was a great shot. There's so many, but
Yeah, there's so many. It's
there's
it's almost
just
like she feels bad.
there's the,
She feels
yeah,
bad for
there's a
him, or she's wondering why is
yeah.
he so calm? What does he know that I don't know?
Yeah, there is that sense, right?
Just the last thing I was going to say was, down to the music. It starts with this pop song, which seems like it wouldn't
I
belong in a
know,
film
right,
like
right.
this, but then it goes to this very menacing song. And again, it's that feeling of just being, overpowered, right? Is that that suffocating of life. So it's
But
yeah,
or it
I mean,
just
every
starts
time you
off with
see
you may want to be like you're going to feel good. It's going to be, and
yeah,
then he takes that away abruptly. Um,
yeah. I mean,
but
it's
staring at like he was also involved with Monica and Vitti, right?
yes.
They
Yeah.
were a couple, and I think during the filming of this movie, and if you're going to put her face and figure on the screen the whole film, which she's practically in every moment, right? I mean, you're going to have a pretty. I mean, audiences are going to have a pretty positive experience, male
Yeah.
or female, because she was quite a figure on camera. She was,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
and
Yeah, she's gorgeous. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about this film?
no, that's kind of wraps it up. I would recommend it without any hesitation to people, and I definitely would also make a point of seeing the three. I mean,
Oh yeah, for sure.
they definitely act independently of one another, but they can also be taken as like a wonderful, um, you know, sort of
Trilogy.
trilogy experience of its time, and it's definitely kind of this very bold period for this filmmaker.
Certainly.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
know,
completely agree. Can you talk a little bit about your podcast, Film Wax, for people who
still
tuning in
going,
for the first time?
still going week after week. Yeah, no, I mean, it's I go through these different periods of interest, or like more I should say I'm always interested, and whenever I'm talking to guests I'm totally 100% enjoy that, and but it's the whole thing. It's been so many years, I've been doing this
Right.
thing, so I'm not really selling it very well, I'm afraid. But I'm still thrilled when I get the right guest, and that guest doesn't have to be any famous or not. It's just like somebody who intrigues me, like it
Hmm.
could be a Philip Lopate. That conversation was so satisfying. And then, I've just like, still enjoy the conversations. I just did talk to, let's say, this Danish filmmaker for a short film just because he's Danish and I'm with a Danish partner. And so whenever I get an introduction, I try to build up my little Danish community. Um, when I have an opportunity to talk to a Danish filmmaker or actor, I but I do also love Scandinavian films, so it's okay.
Mhm.
And we're getting on, and then it's also like yourself, who I know you're a big reader and you love nothing more than reading a film book. That much I know about you, Robert.
Yes.
Um, and so I'm going to pull a Robert Bellissimo and
Oh,
go
the Q court,
like,
the McBride.
yeah, this is what I'm currently finishing up here because I'm going to have Joe McBride on once again. He's been on a few times in the past, and I've talked to him about Billy Wilder, and I've talked to him about George Capra. Talked to him about Frank Capra. I've talked to him about
Ford.
the Coen brothers. I've talked to him about John Ford. How could I
Ford,
forget?
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and now
Those
I'm
are all
really
great episodes.
and Lubitsch, Ernst Lubitsch. I
Lubitsch,
talked to him
yeah.
about Ernst Lubitsch. That was fun because the thing is I'm going to read one of his tomes, and this I mean he is a real freak. This guy Joseph McBride. I mean I'm always impressed with like any like one of the biographers that are out there. There's like a good dozen of these guys, and they're mostly are men. There are some women, but so it's I'm not comparing the quality of the writing. I'm just saying there's a number of these guys that have written like extensively on various filmmakers. And Joe McBride is there, is absolutely, and he comes out with every 2 or 3 years with a different book on, and it's a masterpiece in the sense like he's just really thorough and thought out and real well written, and you learn so much. It's just fantastic. So this one's about George Cukor, and so I've been also. It's taken me a little longer because I also watch the films or rewatch
Yeah.
many of the films, and it's such a pleasure. I mean, most of the time. Sometimes it's a little tough, but so
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons I love doing the podcast because I become a film historian like you. It's of sorts. I don't want to sound too much like I'm patting myself on the back, but I could talk about film at least. To some degree, I can hold my own.
Oh, no,
But
for sure you can. Yeah. No, I listened to all those, yeah, because I've had him on about 3 or 4 times this
yeah.
year already. And yeah,
Oh,
I mean
this
he's a
year?
wealth. Yeah, yeah.
What do you mean?
We did Wells, we did
But did you have him on
Wilder.
earlier than this year as well, or
No, just the first time.
you were just having a McBride festival
This is
this.
yeah, it's been a
And
McBride
each
year.
time you read one of his past books, you had him on. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of one, we started with Ford and then Wells came up and then I said, oh,
Right.
we should
Yeah.
talk about Wells.
What's
And
nice
then,
about yeah, what's also nice, there are many authors will only want to talk about their new book because they're trying to sell them. They need
yeah,
to, and so they're not. And there's a publicist working with, and they're going to not want you to talk about other past books too much. I mean, it's natural that they would come up, but you could actually have an entire episode with Joseph McBride about a book he wrote 25 years
yeah,
ago
yeah,
because
yeah.
he's
He'll
just
talk
such
about
a
anything.
oh yeah,
He's
he's
great.
a talker, and uh, but he's also, you might have to interrupt him, but he's like, he does, he knows he goes on
Oh,
and
yeah.
he likes to be, he likes to laugh about, or he can appreciate he's not completely without humor, I mean, he does,
Yeah. Oh,
have
for
that
sure.
side of
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
I read his Spielberg book and then he has this book, which is about, the period of time where he was trying to write a book about Capra for Random
Yes.
House,
Yeah. I just read
and
that
then
recently.
you read it. That's
Yeah.
That's a great book about just biography, or about being a biographer and what he encountered.
Yeah. He went
At
through hell.
Random House, and just writing that whole story about that experience was like, wow, like
Yeah.
when did you decide to write that book? Like, it's like a story he needed to tell almost, and it was the most personal thing he's ever written, I think, probably. But And then, yeah, I've just been reading one after the other in the last bunch of years. So but I have to kind of start reading other authors that I've been wanting to read too. I just, yikes, there's not enough time of the day.
Oh, I know. And they're really in a good way, really thick, long
Yeah,
books.
right.
Yeah, I'm reading the QQR one soon, and then
Okay.
I'll have him again, I think just before the new year. But yeah, he's been wonderful to get to know and
Yeah.
read a number of his books. Well, I will leave the in the description box below where you can follow Adam on social media and check out his podcast, which is also a YouTube channel. So you could check him out there. Highly recommend his show. Adam, thanks again. This has
Thank
been
you.
great, and I'm sure we'll have you back sometime down the road.
I'm already trying to think of the next film and, I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Well, thanks again, and thank you
All right.
all for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/rubberbellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is exclusive content that you will receive month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details and join today. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on the link, and from there, you can leave a donation if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo, which you will see floating above my head in the top left corner of your screen. So just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release a new video. And lastly, liking the videos, sharing, and commenting all really help to create traction over to my YouTube channel. So please like, please share, please comment, and we can engage together further on my YouTube channel about my various videos and episodes. Thank you so much again, everyone, and I will see you all soon.